nerds and nerdettes and wee little nerdlings all. It's your buddy Big John and G, the two gut Pixie presents Legendary Gaming. Monday is upon us again, my friends. How's everyone doing? I hope you're recovered from the weekend. Alright, so Midday Monologue Monday is back again, as it always is, every single Monday. It's a video every day of the week. So when you find one series that you like, and keep coming back. We got a playlist. Go check them out, everyone. And thank you to the new subscribers. It's amazing that you liked us enough to subscribe. And I hope you continue to be entertained and informed a little bit by Two Gun Pixie. Now, I'm really happy. A little bit more than usual. Because I'm a Gen-Xer, right? In fact, I was an early one. I'm born in '69. My parents were the silent generation. Okay, they were the grandparents to most of their generation was the grandparent generation of most of my friends I grew up with, who were children of baby boomers. But still, Gen Xers, whether you're 68, 69, or whether you're 79, we grew up within a certain culture here in America. We grew up in this huge boom of technology, this amazing time, almost a golden age, if you will, that's never going to be duplicated again. And now, I'm finding quite a few board games. Some of them have been out for a while, some of them are fairly new, that celebrate this. What I'm talking about is board games that Gen Xers are going to find reminiscent. Not the game itself, but what the game is about. So why don't you join me, my fellow Gen Xers, and anyone interested about the 60s, 70s, what we had, what we saw for the first time, how we experienced it, and how these board games I'm going to mention capture, or try to capture, that moment. Cool. I'll see you all down at the table, and we're going to have a lot of fun with this. Oh, it really was a special time that I am so happy I got to experience firsthand. But now we have a lot of games that are an homage, a love letter in some cases, an attempt to replicate some aspects of the late 60s, early 70s, even the early 80s, trying to recapture that. These Gen X board games, right? So there's, wow, quite a few of them that are already out right now. Now, okay, let me start with some reimaginings here. All right, so we within the next couple of months, we are going to see Return to Dark Tower, a brand new update to the 80s greatest board game that they ever came out with. Right, Orson Welles himself doing the commercial. It was fun. And now we're getting an update. Same thing with Hero Quest, another board game from the early 80s that captured the hearts of every Dungeons & Dragons player, as well as anybody that had an interest in fantasy. And especially the people that had an interest in fantasy were a little put off by Dungeons & Dragons. It was a little too complicated for them. This was perfect for them. Same thing with the board game Dungeon. I say it like that because it has the exclamation point. Which was by TSR, the same company that came out with and created Dungeons & Dragons. And all of these games are still here. There's still editions of Dungeon being published regularly every several years. They come out with a new edition. And they call it new editions. It really isn't. I played both the original one from my collection, and I think it's the most recent update from like 2014 or something. No difference in gameplay. None. Now there's 2 standees for each class, male and female, and that's about the only difference I could tell. But it's still out there. So if you remember that game from your childhood, it's still there. But Hero Quest and Return to Dark Tower, they're going to be out in the market in a couple of months. And if you have any fond memory of those games whatsoever, you're going to want to look into this. You're going to want to check it out and get more information and see if these are the kind of games that you want to bring back into your life. Now, video games. Oh, I can't even begin to explain to you the wonder and horror of arcades in the 70s and 80s. Let's just stick to the wonderment for right now. I want this to be a fairly upbeat video. Now, these arcades were amazing places. They were places of social groupings of antisocial people. A lot of the cases, because a really good video game player is going to get so absorbed into that video game that they don't recognize the rest of the world around them. They can't see it. All they can see is what's happening on that screen, which is why I say a social gathering of antisocial people, or events, games, antisocial games. It was a unique place. And the games, these were new. Arcade games. I mean, yeah, we've had like versions of pinball since like the 20s or 30s, I think. But arcade games was new to this time period. And now there's a bunch of board games that are capturing the moment of these games in the arcade. And we have, there's been other versions in the past that have been hit or miss, but we have a great version of Pac-Man out right now for the board gaming groups. That really does a fairly decent job of capturing that feeling of playing Pac-Man. The figure even makes the waka 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 sounds, which can sometimes get a little annoying. Has an interesting way to play each other where you're going back and forth, but of course you can always play the game straightforward, like the arcade where just one person is Pac-Man and has 3 attempts. Every few points or whatever, you get an extra life. You can still play it that way and get in this amazing feeling. Centipede was an arcade classic. It wasn't my particular favorite game, but let me tell you, more people dropped more quarters into that game than a lot of other games in that time period. It had a way of drawing you in. It was hypnotic in the way the centipede and the bugs were racing down the garden towards the gnome. And as things got further along in the game and you were doing better and better, this pace increased to just pure anxiety levels. And now IDW Games has the rights, and they've put out a Centipede board game that does a fairly good job of capturing that feel in a cardboard box. Other arcade games like Joust, which was a favorite of mine, some really weird sci-fi heavy metal magazine inspired joust with 2 knights on these flying ostriches like birds in this lava pit. Multiple levels, and you have to keep pressing the button to flap, and it was insanity. And I loved this game, and now there's a board game version of that too. Missile Command, one of the all-time classic original arcade games, original home Atari games. Again, we see for the board game. More and more of these classic arcade games are being envisioned now as board games. Missile Command, Space Invaders, Pac-Man, Centipede, there's just so many. And I'm quite sure that this isn't going to be the end of it. If there isn't a Frogger board game out there yet, there probably will be soon. I would love to see a Dig Dug board game. But let's see what they decide to give us. Now, another great thing about the time period of my childhood of Gen-Xers was Saturday morning cartoons. And every cartoon fan, everyone that's at least a little bit of a nerd at heart that missed out on that, you know you missed out on something special. It was a ritual. Every Saturday morning, wake up, usually about 6 a.m., get a huge bowl of cereal, put a ton of sugar on top of it because it didn't have enough, Oh, it wasn't using no low-fat milk either. And then just like this huge bowl bigger than my chest, and I would just sit there and scoop up the cereal while being absorbed in all these cartoons, these amazing Hanna-Barbera cartoons, cartoons on every subject. And then as the 70s grew into the 80s, we started seeing arcade games as Saturday morning cartoons, and it was great. It was great. We just watched these cartoons until about noon or so, then run out on the street because we're all hyped up on all that sugar, and then we'd run out on the street and we'd just yell up to each other's windows, "Yo, Dennis, come on down! Yo, Tony, come on down!" And that was it. And that's how we got the gang together, and we all sugared up for long enough to get us through to lunch. It was fun. And now, some of those cartoon experiences from the 80s, the Gen X cartoons, are also starting to find their way into board games. The Great Game Betrayal and House on the Hill has been coming out with some secondary games. There's a Dungeons & Dragons version of it at Baldur's Gate, and there's also a Scooby-Doo version, Betrayal at Mystery Mansion, which brings a lot of the old school fun Scooby-Doo cartoons right here into the board game room, because at its core, the Betrayal games are about solving a mystery that usually has something to do with the supernatural, or in this case, the Scooby-Doo ones seem supernatural, and then there's always some sort of twist about who's really doing this. It's not really a witch, it's not really a reanimated mummy, it's someone in a mask. In this game, at some point, you find out what's happening, and then one of the players gets removed. They get captured, and then that person that was playing that character takes over as the bad guy. It is so Scooby-Doo! And another great cartoon that I've seen they've turned into a board game is Wacky Races. Now, if you're younger than me and not in my generation, then you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. Wacky Races is a really fun Hanna-Barbera cartoon. I can say that right. Hanna-Barbera cartoon that was a race. It was a car race, and had all these wacky characters in their wacky cars participating in the race. And of course, you had the bad guy, Dick Dastardly, and his sidekick, Muttley, who always laughed. His laugh sounded like he smoked like 12 packs of cigarettes a day. I was expecting him to be on a ventilator any minute. But it was a really, really fun cartoon for kids. It was a great, fun cartoon for kids. It showed what happens if you don't participate in fair play, and it promoted fair play. And all the characters were general, except for Dick Dastardly, they were all generally nice to each other. It was a fun show to watch. And now they have a racing board game based on this. Huzzah! Now, here's a weird one I want to throw out there, because I think it fits in with the whole Gen X thing, and that's Monster Crunch. An entire board game about monster cereal. You know, Count Chocula, Frankenberry, Boo Berry, Yummy Mummy, and Fruit Brute. You know those last two I'm talking about? And, you know, it's not an overly complicated game, but it reminds you of being a kid back in like the 80s or the 70s, sitting there with a bowl of cereal like I described earlier, loving on some cartoons. And so it really does. That gives it that Gen X feel to it. There's another one I should have mentioned earlier when I was talking about Return to Dark Tower and Hero Quest, because there was another game that a few years ago was reimagined and re-came out with, and if you're a child of the 60s, 70s, or 80s, then you know Fireball Island. This Marble Madness game got reissued, revamped a little bit, bulked up in size a little bit, and I have it myself, and it's an absolutely fun game to play. And again, it harkens back. Now that's a little, because I was born in '69, that was late '80s, so I was kind of moving away from board games at that point, going all into role-playing games. So I didn't play it at the time. I've played it now, love it, and I still have fond memories of those commercials. Now, another thing about the 80s that I can't pass up, I have to mention Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters was a phenomenon. The second one, maybe not so much. but the original Ghostbusters was definitely a phenomenon. And there's a few board games out there on the market for it. And two of the best, Ghostbusters 1 and 2, I've played, I really enjoy, and it's a really great miniature-based game that makes you feel like you are literally Venkman or Spengler or Stance, Zeddemore. You're one of them, and you're busting the ghosts and closing down portals, and it's really fun. And again, it harkens back to, I can't tell you how many times I saw that in the movie theaters, and I feel like I'm back in the movie theaters watching it when I play the game. Now, although it was a little bit before my time, the reruns went into my life and have continued even nowadays. And as a kid, I remember sitting there and watching the original Star Trek show with my father. Now, my dad was not a big sci-fi fan, but he enjoyed watching this show. Maybe because he enjoyed watching it with me, I'm not sure, but he enjoyed it anyway, and I have a lot of fond memories of sitting in my grandparents' house with my dad on a Friday or Saturday night watching the old Star Trek shows. And there's a few games on that also. My favorite go-to Star Trek game is 5-Year Mission, where you can play as the original or the Next Generation cast, and you're going through push your luck style system, encountering basically whichever you choose, original or next. You're going through their missions. You're going to recognize these missions from the shows. You're going to recognize the photos on the card lifted from these episodes. And that really does pull you right into the whole theme of the game. So there are a lot of Gen X inspired, as I like to think of them, games out of the market. And if you're a Gen Xer like me, you might want to think about maybe picking up some of these games, or at least watching some videos on them, learning some more about them, because they are going to increase that great feeling of reminiscing about your childhood and the things about it that you found special. So go check out some of these Gen X games, please. I'm your buddy Big John and G for Two Gun Pixie Presents Legendary Gaming, and